if there's one thing that I've learned both before and after coming out as like a trans woman, letting everyone know that I was a trans woman, is that you should never underestimate people's capacity to learn.
There's a lot of freedom in being trans that everyone can kind of take a leaf from. Like, it's very liberating.
There's possibility for change within ourselves and with our identity and within our bodies, but there's also, possibility for change within society.
Hi, my name is Maxine Heron. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the online comms officer for trans charity Not a Phase, and I'm also a trans woman myself. To celebrate Trans Awareness Week, we're here with Gay Star News, and I'm going to be chatting to Kenya and Sam. When it comes to Trans Awareness Week, I think so many people focus on the negatives of being trans. There's so much awareness around the discourse that we're dealing with all the time, every day. And I actually just want to take a moment to talk about the positives of being trans, because I think that it's a really beautiful thing. I honestly do. For me, I just feel like I have this really expanded worldview, and I think it really lends itself to navigating the world from one day to the next. I'm like the advice giver out of my friend group. I'm the one that's often like the therapist friend because I've been through some things. Do you have the same? Like, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I resonate with that. I think for me, transness sort of opens up possibility to see other aspects of life as really transformative. And I think for us, there is potential for transformation in your body and in your identity. But I think that also translates, like you were saying, to how we navigate the world and how we're able to see possibility and openness in other areas, which I think is like a really constructive and beneficial thing that not all areas of society can experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I mean, kind of like a similar vein, to be honest. I feel like I have like a different kind of perspective, and I feel like I feel very free and very open to kind of try new things, or like dress in a different way, or like experiment with like makeup, fashion, things like that. I feel like because I had that already, like through transitioning, now I don't really have a fear to do it again. Like, I'm like, oh, that seems like a cool thing. Maybe I'll try that on, or like, I want to go do this thing, so I'll go do that. I think as a person, it's just made me very open to like people from like all walks of life. And like, I have a very like, what's the word? Integrated, lots of different identities overlap in my background.
Intersectionality.
That one.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I think it kind of encompasses all of that and just makes me very open to being more well-rounded and just having big conversations with people.
Yeah, I mean, trans people just aren't judgmental.
No, that is the thing, isn't it?
I think that's something
cool.
really refreshing. Like, there's the census report that came out. Was it last year? It said that less than 1% of the UK's population is trans, and I feel like so much of the population that hasn't maybe had that expanded like sense of self and hasn't been through that journey that we have, maybe has a lot more reservations about people, about what it means to have an identity, about like, the parts of someone and who they are. But we just don't really have that. We've worked through so much already.
We come in all different shapes and sizes, and I think that there's a lot of freedom in being trans that everyone can kind of take a leaf from, to be quite honest. Like, it's very liberating, and I feel like sometimes I've met cis people who've met me and they've kind of been like, oh, I always wanted to do so and so, and I'm like, well, do it. And they've
Literally,
been like,
yeah,
maybe I will. You know what I mean? It's just that. That's.
It is that possibility, I think. It's that, yes, okay, there's possibility for change within ourselves and with our identity and within our bodies, but there's also, possibility for change within society, within certain norms, within experiences. And I feel the same. I feel like I sometimes meet particularly cis men and, they hang out with me and they'll go, God, this is a slightly different experience than hanging out with some other bros.
Yeah.
But I like that and I prefer that, and I'd never really considered that because I've only been in spaces with very macho cis men. I haven't really experienced other types of masculinity. So I think, like you say, it's extremely liberatory.
Or that thing of like, you'll have like that conversation like with some macho men, and I don't know, you'll like talk about something as simple as like, oh, they'll be like, oh, this thing happened at work today, and I'd be like, oh, how do you feel about that? And they'll be like,
I've never been asked.
No, genuinely, it's such small things that I feel like in the trans community that we just have as like a natural thing in conversation, or the way we are with each other, holding space and being like kind, like and aware, like, and you'll have those conversations and they'll be like, oh, whoa,
yeah,
actually I felt like this. Maybe I'll talk about that a bit more. And I'm like, yeah, do.
It's good for you. As trans people with our identity and where we're placed in society, like, we are considered to be non-normative, and this is like what you were saying, we're already out of the norm, and so therefore we're able to experience and experiment with lots of other aspects. And I feel like with the trans community, that non-normativity is often thought of as being really negative, but it can be really celebratory and really liberating to also experience that as a trans person. I think it's lovely.
And you take people for where they're at. Do you know what I mean? And you're also like, but they might change, and there's room for that, and that's also fine.
Yeah,
I feel like that is
Very
a big...
malleable people, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
so it's Trans Awareness Week, and although it's such a moment for the community to like embrace each other and celebrate ourselves, I feel like we need to think about awareness from like a base level, and from the people who maybe have never heard about trans things, never met a trans person. Statistically, I don't know, I can't remember what the exact stats were, but like a lot of people don't know a trans person personally, and all they're relying on is representation to learn about trans people. Is there like one thing that comes to mind that you think people should know about trans people if they don't know anything already?
We're not new. Like, there's not, I don't know, like I feel like there's a lot of the time people are trying to be like, oh, it's a new like woke thing, and it's like, no, existed for hundreds of years throughout history. Like, it's not a new phenomenon or anything, or like outside of the Western world, like culturally, like transness is actually something that's been quite celebrated for like a really long time. That is my big one, to be quite honest. I think that is my biggest one, that kind of through conversation I've found people have found it easier to connect with. I mean, like, oh, okay, like you're coming at me from a perspective of like, okay, historically, like you're telling me these things, like I understand, I see that it's not like a new thing now.
It's a naturally occurring thing, I think. As long as we've had a gendered world, we've had people who have strayed from those majority felt experiences of conforming to that, from like Native America to I believe in India to Mexico, like all these different continents. We've had all these different people who have strayed from those experiences and are really well documented throughout history. It's quite amazing. It's always been there.
And I think the same for healthcare. And we see this a lot, right? Like there's a lot of conversation around how trans healthcare is experimental and it's new, but actually trans healthcare has existed since the 1960s, and it's almost exactly the same process of treatment pathway that people still experience. And when I say the same thing to people, I think there's a realization that a lot of, sort of similar to what you were saying, a lot of our language for transness and a lot of our understanding of gender, at least in, you know, in America and in the UK, is Western language.
Yeah.
And so there's so much more possibility for opening those concepts of gender, because they are, I think everyone can recognize that there are different gender roles in different cultures, but as well as that, there are other non-normative patterns of gender in other cultures. And that, I think if that could be brought out more, so that there was more recognition of those different experiences, I think that could change people's worldview. I think that's really important.
Definitely. There's so much more than just the split of like bigots, people who know nothing, and then woke people. We all have so much fluidity between all of these. And actually, if there's one thing that I've learned both before and after coming out as like a trans woman, letting everyone know that I was a trans woman, is that you should never underestimate people's capacity to learn. And that they can have seen people's minds change right in front of me. I think that Trans Awareness Week is such an opportunity for us to be part of something bigger, and it's about really mobilising those conversations and remembering that maybe if someone's in the bigot category, they don't want to hear about it from a trans person, but they might want to hear about it from you. And you have so much power to bridge that gap really between the two of you and really make like change for everybody. Yeah, everyone's a part of it. For me, like I've got some really special friendships in my life that I've met through being trans. It's like one of the things that I think I'm really grateful for through my trans experience. Like, for example, my best friend, Eloisa, she's like one of my absolute fave people in the world. I just would have never met her, would never have had this bond with someone, like if I hadn't have been through this. It kind of makes it all really worthwhile to have that closeness with someone. Is there someone who's changed your life from the community that you can name?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
It is. There are so many.
I'm still friends with the first person who told me what being trans was, which I
Wow.
think is really lovely. He was out before I was, and this was when I was an early teenager. Yeah, and we're still in contact, transitioned like alongside each other. And every year for Trans Pride, actually in London, I have a lot of my friends over and do a brunch. And so I've got friends who live in different countries who don't have Trans Pride in their own country, and they come over and they spend the weekend, and it's like this lovely 30-person party. But I'm really grateful for those people, because I feel the same. I don't think that they're people that I would have connected with, especially overseas, if I wasn't trans. And it's like, it's a really lovely, intimate bond. And, you know, yes, okay, we are different people, but for the most part, we understand, you know, shared struggles, which is nice.
Yeah, being trans in like the digital age is kind of flex, actually.
No, it is.
Actually, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
So useful.
Yeah.
100%. I feel like one of the first like trans people that I like properly became friends with, like my friend Pete, and like we're still friends now, and we were like Instagram friends like to start with. I can't even remember. I feel like he shared my like, it was a GoFundMe, but it was about housing, and I feel like he shared that, and I was like, oh thanks, didn't know him. We got talking, and then I was like, oh I'm gonna go to Trans Pride, but like this was like by myself basically. So I was like so scared. Like obviously I hadn't been in London that long because I'm from the north originally. So I was like, oh my God. And then like I met up with him and I was like super awkward. I was like, I don't even know like where I sit within this at this moment in time. But like there's so many trans people here and I was like, oh my God. And like, I don't know, like he just had conversations with me that made me feel calm and comfortable. And he was like so secure like in himself. And I was like, oh, it will get a bit less scatty. And sometimes it's still scatty and that's fine. And I love that as well. Like I said, like, you know, you can move. It's not, well, for me personally, it's not as fixed. But yeah, I think meeting him kind of helped me confirm a lot of things about myself and not feel scared. And I appreciate that. And like, he's a very like grounding person.
It's nice when you meet someone who gives you that kind of blueprint that you can follow. And I think it's something that people who are not trans take for granted every day. There's such a blueprint on how they can live their life, particularly if they like conform to more heteronormative expectations. They have like a pattern that they can follow that will show maybe the layout of how their future can look. And we just don't really have that. Like I can count the number of trans people that I know over the age of like 40 on one hand. I have no idea. I'm 30 now. I'm going to be 31 in January. And I have no idea like what the next 10 years are going to look like for me. And I'm glad to be part of that blueprint for other people, but I think that that's why it's so important having those trans bonds, like finding someone who can really share so much of your experience specifically, because even then, like, all of our experiences are so different. We're all trans, but our experiences are so different, and the intersections that each of us sit at are like quite different. And just finding someone who I think shares so many of your like traits is really amazing. To have that safety is really something that a lot of people take for granted.
It's like this reassurance that you can exist.
Just like
really nice. It's necessary, right?
Definitely.
From that experience as well, like we kind of slowly began to build our family, and like within our family, like there's a spectrum of transness, and that in itself is so beautiful, because it was like, oh, I started with one experience with Pete and I was like, oh, okay, cool, great, like this is kind of like these things I need to know because I do want to do these things, but then also meeting these people along the way and being like, wow, like we're all very different. We all sit in very different places on the spectrum. And I just think that is like such a nice reminder, you know, to be around those people and be like, oh, cool, you know, like.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of pride during Trans Awareness Week, and I think something that people need to be aware of is that trans people exist outside their own transness. Like, I've got so many achievements that actually had nothing to do with being trans. And I don't know, I'm proud of a lot of things about myself. Is there like something that comes to mind when you think, actually, I have a bigger achievement than being trans or transitioning or even making it here? Like, is there anything that comes to mind is like, this is actually a much more defining part of my character. This is a bigger milestone for me.
I think recently I got into Soho Theatre's writing club.
Oh, congrats.
900 applicants.
Wow.
48 of us. Yeah. That is a very big thing for me, because I've been writing since I was like 13, like across like different mediums. And I've been like, the last couple of years, I was like, I need to write a play. I should write a play. And just like not doing it. And then like starting to do it, but then like not getting that confidence. So like when I got that email, I was like, okay, cool. Like I got this, you know? And like, that was like a big thing for me, because I'm usually quite a humble person, but I'm trying to be a bit more like, I'm owning it. Like it's a great achievement. And this time next year, we'll have a full length play written.
Amazing.
Yes.
You don't need to be humble about that.
Let it go. Brag about it.
So I'm so excited to start. It's like 9 months long, so like I'm super excited.
Oh, it's incredible. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
That's cool. What about you, Sam?
Well, a lot of my work is tied into my transness.
Oh yeah. I mean, same for me.
Unavoidably. But I feel like, as much as, because of the nature of my work, as much as it is to do with transness, it's not necessarily to do with my transness. It's about transness as it is in society, and how that sort of translates into different areas, right? So I think my proudest achievement's going to come next year when I finish my thesis. And I get my doctorate in trans health, which will be amazing, I think. And you know, the piece of work that I'm working on is something that I haven't yet seen in academia, and I think it's something that's very timely and very necessary.
That's really special.
So as much as it is to do with my transness, it's also to do with everyone else's. And it's also about these, you know, wider questions about society and power, and who has the control over our bodies and our livelihoods, which I think is as much to do with institutions as it is to do with us as individuals. Yeah,
I mean, it's about your, like, you're drawing from your experience as a trans person with this, but it's not the only fuel there. Like, you're also tapping into so many other traits of yourself, like your commitment to this.
I'm also an excellent writer.
You're also smart. Like,
actually,
that's the place.
Yeah, nice. We've got like the full spectrum of like, you know, talents across the board. So we need that. We do need that. That's great.
The Holy Trinity.
Stop. Trademark.
Nice. I love that. What about you?
I've kind of come full circle with being trans. Like, I transitioned during my teens. I was one of the lucky ones who was able to get access to puberty blockers and hormones at a young age, really before this discourse was starting.
When Gillett competence was still a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I even then I was trying to get support on the NHS, and it wasn't really available to me in the timeframes of when my puberty was going to begin. And like, I was really, really lucky to go private with the support of my family. Like, I just was so lucky to have that. But then after I transitioned at 16, I didn't disclose to anyone for about 9 years. I really kept it on the DL. Yeah, it's a long time. And I don't know, I'm from near London. I was only ever so far from the next experience where someone would out me. When I went to university for 1 year, I got outed so much. It was really unpleasant. I was bullied a lot from that period. I felt like I spent big chunks of my life just kind of running from bullies. And I don't know, I was tired of it having power over me. And then I came out about 6 years ago. I didn't ever think I would get to that point with it, but it was really nice and really empowering to just be able to say, like, I don't care who knows anymore, and just be able to know exactly where I stand with everyone around me. And I don't believe that trans people owe the world their disclosure. I think it is completely up to each person. I'm not saying that stealth, as we refer to it, is wrong, but it was wrong for me. I'm so glad that I was able to reach the realization of being like, I can live a prouder life, I can live a more comfortable life by just actually not feeling like I have to hide from this thing. And there are certain things that have been really not straightforward. Like, dating is very difficult for trans people, particularly like as a trans woman who's like attracted to men. It's just like,
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for myself as well, but like, I'm really sorry.
yeah, like, I haven't really dated within the queer community much, so I don't know. I just like, you always have this adjacency to heteronormativity, really, and like, then you're not really navigating people
and how
who
you're perceived through that as well,
like,
right?
Yeah. So I don't know, I've just been working it out a lot, but actually living as an out person has simplified a lot of things for me, and I really like just knowing where I stand with people. Like, it's nice to have given myself that, really.
And now you're working at Not a Phase.
And now I'm working at Not a Phase. I have this like really cool like trans career happening. I'm professional transsexual, like it's happening. Yeah, we love that.
I dream to be you.
Yeah, thank you. People need to become more aware about a lot of things when it comes to trans people. What are the main resources that you think people can turn to that will make them more accurately aware? I feel like there's so much misinformation. There are so many bad depictions in the media and the press. What are reliable sources that people can turn to learn more about us and our experience, do you think?
There's one book that I always recommend, and it's the best book that I've ever read. It informed my PhD, and it's The Histories of the Transgender Child by Jules Jill Peterson. And it's the first book that I've seen that does a really in-depth, it's a historical analysis of how the definitions of sex, gender and transness came about within America. It's very Western, because it's all information about the first GIC, first gender clinic in America. I think, like you were saying, there's a lot of misinformation. I think that people have an awareness of trans people, but I sometimes think that that's leaning towards rainbow lanyarding. You know, when you're sort of like, you stick a pin on and you think that you're aware of it. But I think it's really important, especially during something like Trans Awareness Week, to understand the causes and how we got here and why this keeps happening. So that is the book that literally to every single person I meet, I'm like, you have to read this. It's excellent.
Thank you. I will read it.
Or else.
Yeah. I haven't read it.
Yeah. I feel like you're pretty good for that question. You're the academic in this situation.
If I had my bookshelf next to me,
yeah, you'd be like, you just bring the bookshelf. Just like, this is what we need to do. I have vague ideas in my head, but I don't want to get book titles wrong or things like that.
That's okay. Is there like a documentary that you love, or something, a film, whether it's Paris is Burning or Netflix Disclosure or anything like that?
Of course.
Oh, Will and Harper is so cute. Yeah, it was really cute. I think Will and Harper is a really nice one. I think also like because it's an older trans person, which is quite rare, you know, to see that representation. Yeah. So I think that's quite important to like just take a moment for like. And when I watched it, I kind of took from it, she was very like so open to go back to these places which are very like Mr. Man, very masculinity, like red state places.
Yeah.
But even that, she was just so like open, and the people that she was talking to were also like, oh, okay, cool. Which for me was like, oh, I should maybe be, because I think sometimes, and it's so valid because like there's a lot of things to be angry about, but I think sometimes it can be defensive. Whereas I watched that and I was like, okay, maybe I'll just be a little bit more open sometimes. You know, just a little bit more like, okay, cool, like you don't know about this, first trans person you might have met. Let's have a little chat. And yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember that. It's the intent, right? And I've spoken to so many people who come to me and they'll ask me a question and it will be like grossly offensive. But I have to then think, might be their first interaction. And this is the only language that they've seen.
Yes.
They actually don't have any expansive language. And yes, okay, sometimes they're doing it to be horrible.
Malicious, yeah,
but I have had conversations with people where they go, you know, I'm from this certain place in the world and I actually don't have any of this vocabulary. So
also,
I think that was really important to show in that.
It's a weird one as well, because it's like, in that, like, you know, sometimes it's just people will ask the questions that you shouldn't ask because of like curiosity. But then also, like, there was a point before I transitioned where I also kind of needed to ask those questions. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm kind of like,
we were all ignorant at some point.
and so yeah, it's a weird, but yeah, Will and Harper is a good one. Travis Alabanza is a good person to.
Oh yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, get into research, look at their plays, their writing in general. None of the above.
Yes,
really good.
It's a really good book.
Yeah, great. Alok Vade Menon, I want to say.
I think it's Alok V Menon, maybe.
Yes,
I think
good.
that's their Instagram handle. Yeah, they're great.
Another really cool person.
And the grassroots organisations too, right?
Yeah.
Charities.
Oh, and obviously not
couldn't
Face.
have-
Not Face,
yeah.
of course,
Face,
obviously.
of course.
Yeah.
Would have been great to have that when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I think that in general, actually, looking at like all the like trans charities now, or like the queer charities, it's like it's really nice to have those things online, because I feel like, you know, like the young generation, they're online a little bit more, and like just being able to go to Instagram and be like, oh, I'm gonna type in these people and it's gonna come up with something is like, wow, like
Yeah, if I was rooting through like secret Facebook
Like
groups
Reddit,
trying to
wow,
connect
yeah,
with people,
yeah.
And like I went to, there's a queer bookshop down at the bottom of Brick Lane called the Common Press.
oh, I used to work there.
Oh, I love it there.
But another one, Common Press.
Yeah, it's amazing for me to walk in there and pick up a book and it'll be a whole guide on, you know, how to start hormones and how to manage your transition. And I'm like, God, if I had this when I was 15, and I felt like I was building folders of archives of different information to put it together. And now there's all these resources like, you know, Not a Phase and Mermaids and charities that put out that sort of guidance and help for people. It's incredible.